inspirational talk here at Fellowships in our Vesper service. And I am so pleased to introduce once again Mark Thomas, who will speak this evening on the subject of hope. Mark was born and raised in Rockford, Illinois. His early spiritual development came from his family, which was actively engaged in the United Methodist Church. After graduating from the University of Illinois, Mark moved to New York State, where he took a job managing the outdoor education center for SUNY Brockport. In 1982, after 7 years in that position, Mark and Elaine were married, and he started his training and consulting work in the human resources field. Elaine and Mark began applying the accelerated learning to the teaching of spiritual development practices through their modeling course known as Spiritual Insight Training. In 1988, along with Dr. and Mrs. Panabianco, Elaine and Mark founded Fellowships of the Spirit and its School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy, which is still very successfully going today, many years later. Mark's interest in public service brought him to be elected to the Pomfret Town Board in 1991, and he served as Chautauqua County's executive for 2 terms. In 2007, Mark returned to his original career as the director of the Western District of New York State Parks, retiring from public service in May of 2018. Over the years, Mark's passionate desire for spiritual development has brought him to study Vedic, Taoist, Buddhist, right? What's Buddhist?
I thought it was a new one.
Lovely mystical Christian teachings. And he did that with a variety of teachers and writers from around the world. Maybe he'll tell us about Buddhists today. I don't know. But he currently lectures at various spiritual communities and continues to teach classes in advanced meditation in the School of Spiritual Healing and Prophecy and to its graduates. So let's give a warm welcome to Mark.
Okay, Buddhist, huh? That's my Halloween lecture for next year.
Oh, yeah.
Later this year, yeah. That'll be a Halloween lecture, a Buddhist lecture. I like that idea though. It has some legs. We could do something with it. We could do something with that. Very good. So hope. In February, I believe it was, when Joanne and Jane and I sat down to put our topics together for Vespers for the year, we selected this one, and I knew I was going to be doing the talk. So, yeah, it was just being in the catbird seat. You get to pick the topic you want to talk about this evening. The rest of the year, whatever I get. I'm open to whatever. But this one I chose on purpose. I like the topic. So, in preparation this week for this talk, I came across a couple of people's work, and one of them was Pema Chodron's book. She's a Buddhist nun. And her book is called When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice for Difficult Times. It's a lovely book. It's a collection of a lot of her talks that she's given over time, and it's pretty remarkable. And the other was a video of the late Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong in a sermon he gave, in a video of that in 2014 on Holy Week at a United Church of Christ in Dallas, Texas. So those are the 2 major pieces of influence I was working on chewing with this week, because there was a lot of chewing going on. Chodron's work, her writings, challenged me in some very new ways. Most often, she would relate that hope is looked at as something that we look forward to. We hope something will take place in the future. that a brighter future than the current present moment will make manifest. Well, she took that one on. She said, in doing so, we forsake the present. And I don't use that term, nor did she, lightly. Forsake the present. We sell it out. We let it go. Children equated that with what we do with fear as well. It's only the flip side, she says, of the same coin. Living in a future reality that may or may not exist. Forsaking the present. This examination really triggered some very deep self-examination in me. I came across that a little over a week ago, and I've been chewing on that one ever since. It's a powerful check on how we look at in our modern way at the word hope, the concept of hope. So what I have come to over these ruminations over this concept of hope, and what she stirred up with her awareness and her presentation of this was, what if we deal with hope not in terms of a future consequence, but as a firm stance that we can take in the present? Taking a stance that holds that, come what may, we have the resources internally to not only cope, but to thrive. I saw this as an invitation for us to look at hope as a firmness and a steadfastness in what is occurring right now. Not looking at the present as broken, not looking at ourselves as broken. Looking at, instead, our internal circumstances as containing all that we need to be well. That can manifest in a whole lot of ways. And the second piece I cited that I've been chewing on, as if that's not enough for one talk, is the work of Dr. and Bishop, I should say, John Shelby Spong. Now, his work was more comforting to me this week in certain ways, in many ways. And in this 2014 sermon, he spoke very strongly and controversially in his challenge to Christian churches' 4th century doctrine on original sin. If you're not familiar with that, original sin is a concept based upon a theological stance that we are broken from birth until death, and we can't do anything about it. We can try, but we are fundamentally broken, and we have to be saved by some external Messiah. Like the Aramaic biblical translations of Rocco Errico and his mentor, Dr. Lamza, Bishop Spong spoke of our humanity as not broken, but incomplete. A very different way to look at it. Rocco Errico references the Aramaic translations of the word sin and evil as incompleteness, unripeness, or immaturity. Original sin is a theological position that I have wrestled with since high school. I remember in youth group when one of my best buddies in the youth group at the Methodist Church growing up, his mom had another baby, and I loved to ask the ministers tough questions. Being a kid, in high school, you got to do this stuff. You got to go through that stage of development. And I said, so Reverend Grotehouse, are you telling me that this baby is sinful? He hasn't done anything wrong. How can you say it's sinned when it's just been born? It hasn't done anything to commit a sin. We could be sin. We could do all kinds of sinful things. That baby hasn't done any sin. How can the church tell us that that baby is sinful? I could never get a good answer from that, even though there are a number of pastors tried. It's a hard concept to wrap your head around, and I never have, and I don't think I ever will. I could be wrong.
No,
They could, yes, but I could be wrong too.
No, I'm saying they're wrong.
Yeah. Well, the concept I never have been able to warm up to. So Spong goes on, we must remove this narrative that Jesus died for our sins. In this sermon, he went on to say, we are not originally broken and we do not need saving. The most important part, he went on to say, of the Easter experience for him is to look at not the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus later on, but to look at the crucifixion itself. And that one was like, ooh, where's he going to go with this? Well, for me, one of the things over time that in my study of the biblical work, in the book of the Gospel of Luke, Jesus goes into the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he was arrested to pray. And he takes several of his disciples with him. And he tells them to sit aside, and they fall asleep, and he goes into his prayers. And the prayers are written out, what he was praying for. Anyway, one of the references in Luke is that he was so distressed that he sweat blood during those prayers. And that, that's one of those Aramaic idioms. We'd think, he was actually had blood dripping off him. No, that is an Aramaic idiom. It's like when somebody would say, that really burns me up. Well, it doesn't burn you up. It's an idiom. It's one of our idioms in our culture. Well, if he was sweating blood, it meant that he was in profound distress at the time he was praying. And yet, in that process of that prayer, he came to peace. And with that peace, his direction and his life would proceed. And in the next 24 hours, he would live out his mission, even through humiliation, ridicule, torture, and death, and remain at peace throughout. There were accounts of his final words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then later on, El Lamana Shwaktani, which has been badly translated into English from Aramaic to, why, my God, why have you forsaken me? He would never have said that. He would not have been at peace and said that. The Aramaic translation of that makes total sense. And when I learned of that from Dr. Errico and Dr. Lamza, it made all of this come together for me in some remarkable ways. It translates directly from Aramaic to English and not through the Greek. O God, for this is my destiny that I came to fulfill. This is my destiny. And in the end, he said, it is fulfilled at another passage. We think of it as a heaviness, when somebody's life is taken. His life, though, was his message. It was simple. It was love God and hold universal compassion for all people, including the ones that are torturing you and taking your life while they're doing it. I don't know how many of us, I know myself, would be able to hold compassion under those kinds of circumstances. But he did. He was living life to its fullest and loving even those who were taking his life from him. His final hours were reflective of his entire life's walk. We're not inconsistent. He remained consistent even through all of that heavy ending. The richness of the example he left us is in the way he took on desperate hardships and literally walked through the valley of the shadow of death, not fearing evil. Jesus was not bargaining away for actions of this life for the glory in another existence. And he was also not doing such for anybody else. His message played out in his actions. Love never ends, and love, therefore, is the eternal expression of who we are. Death which we humans fear more than about anything else, does not have the final word. Is that not the message of spiritualism? Is that not the hope you can live with this lifetime, here and now, if that's the case? Love has the final word. Is this not an invitation in this ancient Easter story for us to live hopefully, love uncontainably, with firmness and steadfastness? What greater feeling of hope can there be? To sit with hope, to stand with hope, to walk with hope, and to rest in hope. Faith, hope, and love abide, wrote the Apostle Paul. Faith, hope, and love abide. He wrote, may you abide in hope this day and forevermore. Amen. Thank you all.